Hello and welcome to Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast presented by me, Toby Hadoke, and me, Toby Hadoke with a spiky face, in which I watch Doctor Who and try to guess what my special guests' favourite things about their nominated story are.
My name is Frazer Gregory. I am a part-time podcaster. If you'd like to hear more from me, you can find me on The Name and Be Praised, Gallifrey's Most Wanted, Doctor Who Literature with Jason Miller, the Trap One podcast, but mostly you will find me on A Hamster with a Blunt Penknife with my good friends Joe Ford and Simon Hart. Today I have come to discuss my favourite story from season 18 of Doctor Who, which is Meglos.
Well, hello everybody. It's time for the final part of Meglos, which I hope takes you to happy times and places, although, it has to be said, the times are somewhat truncated, even if the places are all present and correct, and it's pretty much all of the places of the whole story, because we go back to Zolfathura in this final episode. The image I have in my head of this is lots of sort of wandering around the scene sync stuff in that sort of night, isn't it? And I do remember watching, this when it went out. I sort of remember the bit where the two Tom Bakers face each other, and other little images. And it's funny, isn't it, how those images from the first time we watched it stay in our head, even though, I've seen this many times since, but I still feel I still recall the sort of feel and the vague ambience of where I was when I watched this when it went out. And this is I remember season 17, mostly I remember bits bits from each story, but season 18 was when I was probably my first proper season, maybe as a fan. I don't know, it's difficult. I was certainly excited by Doctor Who when I watched season 17, but I don't know, it somehow felt more complete an experience, or maybe I was more in control of it, or whatever. Watching season 18, I remember, I have very strong memories of this as a boy, which was a long time ago. And Meglos, I enjoyed as much as any of the others. There was no stylistic difference between Meglos to me and any of the other stories. In fact, as I say, I'm the sort of maths in a lay-by of Logopolis. Its subtleties and intricacies were slightly lost on me, and I was desperate for it not to be about changing tyres or wandering around with a ruler. But that's just me. I do understand the great beauties of Logopolis now, and I'm probably sometimes in more of a mood to watch Logopolis now than I am Meglos. But I think Meglos, trots away and is it doesn't outstay its welcome, as we will discover. It almost decides to end the party rather early. So let us watch from the beginning, as I hope you are going to enjoy the 19 or so minutes of Meglos, Part 4, in 3, 2, 1. Now, of course, I've got to remember to be on the eye out for something I like about this episode, but also for something I like about the whole of Meglos. Somebody on my Patreon page, God bless them, has checked, and Crawford Logan is credited with playing Meglos. I think I might have said this on one of the previous episodes, but is credited with playing Meglos on the Blu-ray. So somebody found that bit of paper, if there was a bit of paper, or somebody listened to my podcast. It doesn't matter, so long as it is correct. That is all I'm after. Now, this is fascinating, isn't it? Because they've started 2 scenes before the final scene. So, it's a short episode, but it's also a short episode that has quite a lot of footage we've already seen. It's James Gould, by the way. Thank you, James, who went to the trouble to check the season 18 production notes to see that Crawford Logan was correctly credited as the voice of Meglos in part 1. So we're still on footage from that. Now Frazer has chosen Romana's costume, so I'm now looking at it, and it's not only is it a gorgeous sort of scarlet colour, it has flowers on it, so it's sort of apposite for the planet, the surface of the planet. It's like her costume in some way is a symbolic representation of the psychotic vegetable life of the planet Tigella that they're going to be kind of just numbered with at the end of the story, because they don't actually get the dodecahedron back, do they? The costumes are great. I think the color scheme, the purple or pink and black always goes well together. I remembered around this time at school, one of the great things that we had as children that was akin to rocket science when I was a boy, which you might not be, which you might not have had, and the young amongst you won't realise. This Tom, I think, is slightly doing his. It's his slightly half-assed cliffhanger acting. Can I say that? And slightly, there's a slight sort of comical edge. Look, he does the sort of, he's not being entirely serious when he does that, and he's not being entirely committed to it. I don't think he does occasionally do a cliffhanger ending, like at the end of The Sunmakers, where he kind of does a. Now that final shot, no. Fair enough, he's kind of going for it there, but I'm still not sure he's entirely committed to it. Anyway, so now we're in. I think it's something like, is that about 3.5 minutes? And then we have 50 seconds at the end for the closing title. So that's about just over 4 minutes 20, something like that. So of the 19 minutes, we still only get about 15 minutes. But anyway, yes, the rocket science that we had when I was younger was that because pink and black, you'd think, oh, they're opposites, they don't work, but you'd have coloured pens, like felt tip pens, like a black one, and you'd get this white one as well. And if you painted something black, coloured something in black, you could then put this white one through it, and it would strip away some of the colour, and it would be pink. It would make it pink, and it did that with other colours as well. There would be a pen would basically be a felt tip would be two colours, one colour on the pen top and one colour on the pen base or whatever, and you could have hours of fun. That was science to us. I remember my nan got me a set of them for Christmas, and yes, it was basically your 5 or 6 felt tip pens, but it was 2 felt tip pens because you could do a clever thing with this white ink, and I've completely forgotten about those until seeing, because that pink and that black of the Dion's costumes were pretty much the two ends of the scale on the black felt tip. He's got wonderful eyes. I mean, it's a sort of boggle eye off, isn't it? Tom Baker and Bill Frazer. And I was gonna say, you don't get beards like that anymore. But actually, I've just watched that rather wonderful episode of The Last of Us with Murray Bartlett and Nick Offerman, and they're better than General Grugger's beard, but they are still applied beards. So I was going to say, yeah, you don't get beards like that anymore. You kind of do. There's actually some very nice... Terence Dudley shoots some of these close-ups very, very nicely, and I think the lighting is very effective in this story. And this... I wonder... I mean, bits of people keep disappearing with the CSO here. I kind of applaud the ambition, and I like these big screens, but I mean, Meglos hasn't got any legs there. I mean, he's almost sort of fading into the sand. But I don't know. And as I say, I used to be very worried about CSO in the older days. I wonder if it's been slightly improved. Excuse me, I yawned then. That's nothing to do with Meglos. It's to do with the fact that it's quite late, and I'm doing this at the end of... Oh, God, I mean, Tom Baker looks like he was walking... He was Long John Silver on both legs there. The lovely running joke about the doctor's coat, which I like. His rather nice coat. Now that he's finished playing the Doctor, there we are. I mean, that's because it hadn't been announced, and I don't think he'd even decided that he wasn't playing the Doctor anymore. So, that's a joke that actually ends up being where time actually gives it a resonance that it didn't have at the time, because it hadn't been announced that he was leaving at this point. So I'm pretty certain anyway. I'm pretty certain. No, I know it wasn't. I remember when Warriors Gate was on, I was anticipating, when Tom Baker was gonna be leaving. I knew by then that he was leaving. I'm pretty certain. Let's not get into that. That's not what these are for. You can look up dates. I'm not going to look up dates before these. These are reactions, memories, observations. Right. So this scene is an extraordinary thing. So we've had no establishing that where Lexa is. The start of the scene, she's got her back to camera, and within seconds of the scene, she's done the sort of jump in front of a gun to save Romana. It doesn't look like that in the execution. I mean, Lalla Ward then gives it some real gravitas. She looks desperately sad in the close-up after the extra who's had his gun rather shabbily kicked away, half-heartedly kicked away by Crawford Logan. It's still within his reach, and presumably what it was he was mortally injured, and he went to shoot Romana, and then he died. And Lexa jumped in the way of the laser beam. But that is not what happens on screen. Basically, everyone's saying goodbye. You then see him shoot, and there's a bit of, if it's not ADR, it's certainly a sort of cursory off-camera shout of "Look out, Romana" or whatever. He then sort of goes to sleep. Crawford Logan sort of half-heartedly kicks the gun, but not at actually any distance. And Lexa's dead, and Romana gives it, that beefy, hefty, she saved my life that is a staple of such occasions. But it didn't look like that she did. And also, I mean, I'm baffled as to why. Had they even met? I'm not sure they had. But even if they had not, I mean, I would say not enough. I think that's one of the most shoddily executed scenes in the whole of Doctor Who history. So it does feel slightly frayed at the edges. I'm sort of pleased that it exists, because it sort of shows how those sort of scenes could, how more often things like that could happen with the Time Against Doctor Who and the difficulties of multi-camera. And Terence Dudley hasn't shot all of this particularly badly. And in fact, I did like the fact that the big stone temple building had a ceiling on it as well, so he could get some quite low angles, because you don't normally see ceilings in Doctor Who. And occasionally we've had sets that have had ceilings for artistic purposes, but that was a practical ceiling because you had to see the stone. But anyway, it meant that all the angles there were nice. And I think it's fun that it's now night on Zulfa Thura, because it means that when the TARDIS landed, you could basically land it in front of a black backcloth and just have a bit of this throbbing of the dodecahedron is beautiful. And I like these. I like the model that everyone's been sort of projected onto. I think it's ambitious, and I think it looks rather good, and I do love a model anyway. There's something, and this is quite fun, because he's only a supporting artiste with Sholak from the Rebos Operations helmet. You could throw in a line where they say, we've just been to the planet Rebos and pilfered some bodies, but. This is the same as this. Well done him for going to grab the coat and then not. I think that's quite funny, and we can afford that because he's only an extra. Grugger and Brotadak are doing the talking, and anyway, they're now very much secondary villains because Meglos is the main threat. So the fact that a sort of walk-on. A piratical supernumerary is left holding the screen up, I think is quite fun. Romana leading Grugger and Brotadak round, the wrong way and outwitting them there does undermine them slightly, but I mean, they're comedy villains anyway. So if anyone wanted to argue that diluted the threat somewhat, I'd accept it. But I think having a stupid guard is all well and good. Quite now, why he's just walked in though and not said anything. Well, we know why he hasn't said anything, because he's not allowed to. He's an extra, as is Bruce Callender there, just walking off. And then there's the. I noticed, because I don't think they quite rationalise who was in the spaceship of the Gaztacs and who's now on the planet. It's whoever was booked for various days, I think. But Tony Aleph is the big one with the big bald one with the moustache. He's in a couple of Bond films, I think, and did a few. I think there's a few other Doctor Who's, but only as a supporting artiste. But again, they are because he was. Somewhere Mediterranean, was he Greek, something like that? And there's yes, there are different ethnicities amongst the Gaztac extras, and yes, it's fun. It's fun spotting. It's because this is not a bad one for extras, actually. I think David Cleave is one of the Dions as well, and he dates back. Well, he's one of the few people who was credited as an actor, David Woolliscroft, in the Space Museum, who then ends up sort of doing supporting work and is an extra as David Cleave, from Time Warrior, something like that. And he was also the partner of Charles Pemberton, who's a Cyberman in Tomb of the Cybermen, who actually did do quite a lot of acting work, usually playing sort of rotund mayors and mustachioed policemen. Both of their pictures hang in the Club for Acts and Actors, where I occasionally hang around. Oh, well, actually, I hang around when I'm in London. I'm a member, and I love this repeated punch is it's quite funny. They've done the gag. The doctor goes, "Oh, that looks painful," and then he gets delivered exactly the same. That's all quite fun. With one of the more famous names, I mean famous as in the sort of neck of the woods that I hang about in the Club for Acts and Actors. I mean, occasionally we get Frank Williams, who was the vicar in Dad's Army, and Michael Leader, who was the milkman in EastEnders, but he's also one of the pteroleptils at the end of The Visitation. And he claimed, I heard him once claiming to be the stormtrooper who banged his head on the door. That stormtrooper, the Woodstock of stormtroopers that every supporting artiste who was in Star Trek claims to have been that stormtrooper Woodstock. But anyway, Pamela Cundell used to hold court drinking port in the Club for Acts and Actors, Mrs. Fox from Dad's Army, and she was the wife of Bill Fraser. And I would occasionally chat to Pamela, and she was lovely. So I'm 1 degree from Bill Fraser, but he died. I mean, and of course he was casting K9 and Company as well, so he seemed very much around at this time. I remember being on Wogan as well. I like the way that Tom Baker is quite insolent with his villains. I was thinking of Zygons the other day, where it says, wave a tentacle. And he does the grin in the way, but the way he sort of sits with his arms folded, or his, and he's just kind of like, yeah, there's nothing more insulting if you're a grandstanding villain than a sort of shabby Time Lord not being in awe of you, And when he's doing the sort of cold, almost psychotic Meglos, he's he is very, very unsettling. As I said the other day, I don't think it's a massively consistent performance. And this is another one of those scenes that is kind of, shockingly executed. The poor old extra, Bruce Callender here, has been told to sort of stand there grinning at the dog. And then he gets smacked on the head by a rock, which doesn't knock him out. But then he has to stand there and doesn't react, so has to get shot twice. Because they just have to sort of bridge that gap, and they go, well, let's bridge it by shooting it twice. And he's hitting his marks, and he's turning around, and he's marking that, and then he's falling down. But because there's no cutting, because it's multi-camera, because everything has to sort of be marked, and it's got to have the space for the special effects. Oh, it's clunky. And I mean, I think we noticed that stuff as kids. We sort of went, and because Canine's gun always as well, because I think it's very difficult to get the geometry right, isn't it? With quite often, that's great. He's got a blaster, and the blast comes out of his nose, but actually, depending on where it needed to hit the actor, there's the famous one, isn't there, in Nightmare of Eden? It sort of goes at a sort of funny angle. Although, that was a slightly spread beam to get away with that. It's interesting that they don't bother to do any of the good guys are hoodwinked by Meglos or have to spend a bit of... I have to say, as somebody that's used to these kinds of stories, I'm quite pleased that we don't sort of waste our time with going, but which one is Doctor Who and which one is Meglos? But they really don't bother at all. Meglos immediately goes, I am the bad guy. And they go, okay, there we go. But I quite like that it slips away and we get to see we get to see the do you want to be atomized? No. I love that. I love the City Gent. And Meglos, of course, was going to be brought back in The Lodger, wasn't he? He was going to be the bad guy in the Matt Smith story, The Lodger, and the whole idea was going to be that the Doctor would go, Meglos, no, I don't remember you, which I would have found at once really annoying, because I don't like Doctor Who not paying homage to its past and not respecting what has come before, but also really, really funny, because something can be both of those things. What is it they say in the League of Gentlemen when they eat human flesh, isn't it? What is it? I know it's wrong, but it feels so good. You can laugh at things that you kind of know deep down you don't approve of. And that's fine, 5 forts, sinking, all of that. It's and sadly we don't see this final scene. That model's great, actually. I love all of that. I love the thing rising out of the planet and sinking back down, and it makes a virtue of that scene sink stuff. So, are we to understand that this main power source of the planet Tigella is now just gone, and look at everyone's at the back sort of indulging in deforestation, which is, they've been hiding all their lives. I know there's been an argument saying, we should do that, but I suspect they'll find it harder now they don't have the source of all their power. It would have been nice. Actually, no, would it have been nice to see him return? No, I quite like the fact that he gets the close-up at the end, the dear old Earthling. Damn, sorry, because I've had remote control trouble, so I'm doing it on my phone. So by the time I called that up to do the closing credits, it had vanished. But we've had this. You've had my tirade about online streaming services jumping away from the credits with criminal speed. So I think you know where I stand on that. So that was a very short episode of Doctor Who. Oh, I have poor lovely Bernard sleeping next to me. You okay, pal? We've had a slightly rotten day. We had an altercation with a mean dog in the park, and then a mean man. But then when I managed to be calm about the whole thing. Now, of course, I've rehearsed millions of things I'd have loved to have said, but in the circumstances, I think logic tells me I was right to deflate the situation with the scary man with the scary dog. And God bless 2 members of the public who called me over and made sure I was all right and assured me that he was entirely in the wrong and I was entirely in the right, and that was nice. But anyway, so we've had quite a stressful day, haven't we, Bernard? So Bernard has been pressed right into me sleeping as I was watching Meglos Part 4, and not had a good, not a good evening, really. It's sort of detoxing from that by kind of not doing very much, but I felt I needed to do something with the day. And of course, what is Doctor Who if it is not, an escape from the genuine struggles and fears of life into... And I sort of forgot about it for, I was going to say 25 minutes, but that would have been optimistic. But as soon as it finished, I was back in the real world, and I'm just making sure that Bernard's all right, because he got rather stressed, because he got sort of chest thumped by this over-enthusiastic dog. And then I got threatened by his owner after I suggested that he put his dog on a leash who kept coming back for more. Anyway, you don't need to hear about that, but I think it's an illustration. It's cathartic, isn't it, just to say stuff out loud? Yeah, I'm not going to pretend it's of any use to this podcast, but it is sometimes useful to say things out loud. I say a lot of things out loud, but I find that does help the demons to go away a little bit. That's why that's why people go into therapy, isn't it? Some people have therapy. Some people have watching a Doctor Who story, trying to find the nice things about it, and also, having your cares for the day get washed away. The winds of time will wash us clean. Well, so will the jungles of Tigella. So anyway, I like that. I like that line in episode 1 as well. I've got that where Zastor says about the Doctor sees the threads that bind the universe together and mend them when they break. I've just remembered that. See, even a story that has all sorts of problems with its writing and its execution has glorious and lovely moments within. So I've got to choose a favourite moment from episode 4, or a favourite thing about episode 4, and a favourite thing overall. And I've chosen, for episode 1, I chose Jacqueline Hill, which I still think Frazer might choose. For episode... I can't remember what I've chosen now. Oh no, for episode 2 I chose that piece of music, didn't I? And that piece of music that goes through a whole couple of scenes and was on Doctor Who the music. For episode 3 I chose the Earthman and the image of the city gent and that visual of him pulling out and pulling away from Meglos. So I can't have any of those 3 things, and if Frazer chooses any of those 3 things as his thing for episode 4, I mean, he can't choose all of them because they're not all in episode 4, or his thing overall, his bonus thing, then I might claw a point back. But even if he chooses 2 things that I choose now or have already chosen, he's still beaten me. I'm still going to get nowhere with Meglos, but that's okay because it's done its job. It's entertained me, and it's taken me out of the real world, which I was quite happy for it to do. So, I spend my life just trying to be nice and reasonable and affable. People are still mean. I think that's the thing that depresses me more than anything. So you go, I really do try to give nobody a reason to be horrible to me. But some people are still. But I always try and give people the benefit of the doubt and go, well, what must their life be like? What must they be feeling? Not in a victorious way. I don't like that kind of, you've probably got a shit life, so I don't think that. It's more, what state of mind they must be in to be so quick to be threatening and unkind. Maybe he's been taken over by a spiky cactus and therefore was not in control of himself. There we go. We'll give him the benefit. He did have a rather wispy beard. I mean, he could have taken me out, I'm sure. Well, I know. It was wiry and aggressive, and I am bumbling, and my muscles are knitted together with tweed. But I had a much better set of facial hair than him. Yes, wispy like a cactus spike was his excuse for a moustache. I could have flayed him with my tongue. Now, you see, you have to laugh as well, isn't it? That's what Doctor Who teaches you. That's why I sort of forgive sometimes Tom Baker his cavalier attitude towards the drama. I mean, he is naughty, but he was my first Doctor, and he's the Doctor, if any, that tells us that, the way to deal with the violent and the threatening and the pompous and the self-aggrandizing and the downright nasty is to deflate it, and to defeat it with humor. I mean, I didn't defeat it with humor then. I defeated it with, just being very calm and not inflaming the situation. But I'll have to turn it into humour from here on in because, well, I won't. What I'll do is I'll replay it in my head over and over again between now and the day I die, thinking of all the things I should have said and done. And will make myself watch Doctor Who in order to forget it. So, listen, this episode has been longer than even the episode 4 of Meglos should have been. I am going to choose, well, I'm not going to choose the death of Lexa. I'm not going to choose the scene where the guard gets zapped twice by K9. My favourite thing about episode 4 and my favourite thing about Meglos as a whole. Well, I think my favourite thing about episode 4 is probably the gag about the coat. I do like the gag about the coat, and that the line about now he's finished playing the Doctor is rather fun, even though I don't think the dates quite tie up. Don't write in. I'll check immediately after this to satisfy myself, and if I'm right, I'll be pleased, and if I'm wrong, oh well, never mind. Because I do not research for these. I research for the other ones. These are the ones I just try and do off the top of my head because I can't spend every minute of every day preparing for these. So I'm writing a book about Quatermass, don't you know? And walking my dog to get peaceful and relaxed in the park that I get threatened in. Right, shush. I think the joke about the coat is my favourite thing about episode 4. And I think my favourite thing about the whole of Meglos is that wonderful story. And I remember, because I'd not remembered the character, I have to say, having watched it. And then I got the book. And the book was one of the, as I say, one of the few books that I got not that long after broadcast. It was a story that was still quite fresh to me. And I got the target novel. And again, I tended to get the target novels to try and picture the stories I hadn't seen or couldn't see. So the idea of reading Meglos when I kind of knew Meglos, but enough time, there was no chance of ever watching it on video or anything in those days. So I did read the book. And I remember being thoroughly taken with the character of Brotadak. And I tried to imagine what he would look like and I couldn't imagine him. As I say, I couldn't remember him from the TV version. And then I remember watching this thing called Brat Farrar that had Mark Greenstreet as twins in it, actually. And had... was it Hannah Gordon or Prunella Scales? I think it was Hannah Gordon, maybe. And they got top billing over Mark Greenstreet. Frederick Treves and the woman, whoever it was, got credited over Mark Greenstreet, even though he was, did the most in it. So I thought, well, they must be very famous, but I don't know this Frederick Treves. And then I'd see him pop up in other things. And it was only when I got the Doctor Who magazine and the program, the episode guides, that I thought, well, I need to, because I knew Bill Fraser had played General Gregor. I knew that. I knew by that time Jacqueline Hill had been Lexa. I said, well, let's see who plays Brotadak then. And I imagined him to be sort of a young, cheeky actor. It hadn't quite registered in the book that he was, as old and grizzled as Grugger. And I was shocked to see it was Frederick Treves. So even then I was going, I can't rationalise that brigadiery, ministery type, tweed-jacketed sort of, posh guy actor, as John Deere says on my Twitter page. Isn't he the Minister of Defence or whatever? He is the General Chief of Defence Staff in Yes, Prime Minister. But he popped up in all sorts of stuff. And his son Simon Treves is a working actor today. And of course, Frederick Treves has the same name as the Frederick Treves who looked after the Elephant Man, and indeed Frederick Treves is in the Elephant Man, and I think he is a relation of the Frederick Treves who was the guy that looked after Joseph John Merrick, the Elephant Man. So that's all nice too. But anyway, so the long and the short of it is, and then of course I did, was told that story or read that story or whatever, that Brotadak is so called, and it's a great name. I called him Brotadak, I think, when I read the book. But Brotadak, as the spelling of the series is, but not in the book, because it was changed between the series and the book, because John Nathan Turner discovered its true meaning, which is that Brotatak is an anagram of bad actor, because John Flanagan and Andrew McCulloch thought it would be a bad actor who would play the part. And when Frederick Treves was told this or discovered this, he, gleefully rang up his wife to tell her. So it was all taken in good spirit. And of course, he's not a bad actor at all. But I have to say, even when I read it in the episode guide, I was like, I cannot imagine it being that actor. And then when I watched it, when I finally got it on video, I still sort of thought he was unrecognizable, because he's much scrawnier than you'd imagine, and he were and you didn't normally see him with stubble. And anyway, yeah, so it's a complete transformation, and he has great fun, and he's very good, and I like the joke. So I like the character, I like the joke, I like that it's that actor, I like that it's that actor completely unrecognizable. I like that actor's been in Doctor Who, but he's been in Doctor Who not playing a senior army official or a government type, but playing that and having a great time doing it. I mean, he is quite eye-popping and face-pulling, and the way he does the cliffhanger for episode 2 is, that up 2 or 3 octaves, because it's dramatic sci-fi acting stuff. It's Stephen Fry does it. I've mentioned this in other podcasts, I'm sure, where it's a Blackadder set in the future, and Stephen Fry plays this. Hugh Laurie played this double-headed alien. I think Patsy Byrne's the third head. I think it's a triple-headed alien, and he has a line where he says, "Sent into the sprouting chamber," and that sort of up a couple of notes into a screech is very much the same as "She's seen too much, kill her." So it's all going on with Brotadak. There's a history to it. There's a story behind it. Even the change between the televised version and the book version. There's so much going on from that one simple thing, calling that a character. It's a character, but the interest in it spins off in so many different directions, and that's what I love about Doctor Who, is that you can have occasions like that most people watching it won't know or care about that, but if you want, you can spin that occurrence, that character, that name, into all sorts of different directions, from the actor playing it to the change to the story behind it to the what the actor playing it did when he was told, and all of that. Boom, 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 boom. Love it. So it's a double whammy for Brotadak, really. It's the coat gag is my favourite thing of episode 4, and my bonus thing for the whole thing is Brotadak, the naming, the casting, the very existence, and all the brouhaha that surrounds him. So, what are Frazer's 2 things for this episode of Happy Times and Places, where he, will choose his favourite thing for episode 4 and his favourite bonus overall thing. So let us choose episode 4 first. Hello, come in, Frazer. Come in, Frazer.
Hello again, everybody. Episode 4, and my favourite thing that I have picked for episode 4 is the jungle of Tigella. Don't honestly think that Doctor Who has managed to produce a bad jungle, and I think this one is up there with all the greats we've had through the Tom Baker era. So Creature from the Pit, Face of Evil, Planet of Evil, all fantastic jungles, and this one is no exception. The thing that I really like about the jungle on Tigella, though, and that is the thing that I am actually picking, is the sound of the jungle. I just love that. It sounds just like the planet of the Daleks and the Dalek Master Plan. It has those sort of weird alien screeches that are instantly recognisable and instantly take you to a Doctor Who planet, a Doctor Who alien jungle. So the sound of Tigella is my 4th favourite thing about Meglos.
Well, very, very good. I'm at a disadvantage there because, unfortunately, with the sound, because doing this, I'm chatting through it. I do love the jungle sounds of Doctor Who. I particularly love them in the 60s. And I do think that jungle. I do think Doctor Who has an illustrious history of jungles, and the Tigella one, I suppose, doesn't get talked about that much. And when it does, it's the attention focuses on the bell plants and those sequences, which were, was publicity or talk of the time was attention was drawn to them, and they're actually they're just quite a quick moment, quite cursory in their screen time and execution. But I cannot criticize Frazer's choice. It is not a bad jungle at all. I didn't really hear what it sounded like this time around, but if it's got those and all of that, the 60s sounds, if they've used that tape, then I love that tape, and I love all the noises of Doctor Who's sound is very, very special. So Meglos bonus thing from Frazer, but yeah, that's a good choice. Wasn't one of my choices. See, we're spoilt for choice even with dear old Meglos. So bonus thing, come in again, Frazer.
So for my fifth and final bonus thing, that is the thing that I love about Meglos, I have picked the incomparable, indomitable, indefatigable Jacqueline Hill. What more can I say about Jacqueline Hill that hasn't been said before? She's just an absolute legend of Doctor Who. Barbara sets the tone, sets the standard for companions. You see her DNA running right through into Rose and Amy and everyone else we've had ever since. Obviously in Meglos, though, she's not playing Barbara, she's playing Lexa, so she comes in and plays a completely different character, but gives her such grace and stature and credibility and gravitas. She's just wonderful. She's just wonderful. That role could have been so much less than what it was, but Jacqueline Hill comes in and just, you can't take your eyes off her every time she's on the screen, and your heart just fills with so much warmth when you see her. So yeah, Jacqueline Hill is my bonus thing to love about Meglos.
Well, we're back where we started, because Jacqueline Hill was my choice for episode 1, and it was I was slightly game playing there, because I didn't doubt for a second that Frazer would choose Jacqueline Hill, so I got in there early. Although I love that bit where she goes, "Then where?" in episode 1. So it wasn't entirely gamesmanship, but I suspected she'd be along sooner rather than later. Well, I was wrong about that, because she was around as late as possible. So I scramble a tiny little scintilla of joy just at the end, after a rather barren 4 episodes. Just at the end, something comes along and shows me that life is okay. Which is a bit like my altercation in the park, when those 2 nice passers-by stopped and just made sure I was all right. Offered to walk me home as well. I clearly don't look like I can look after myself, and I fantasize about doing kung fu. But anyway, perhaps kung fu is, I was not born to do kung fu. I was born to, identify extras in episodes of Doctor Who. Somebody's got to do it. Have they? Somebody's got it. Well, I'm doing it anyway. So look, it's nice to have someone to talk to, even though I'm not talking directly to any of you. I like communicating with people and sharing my love of this stuff, and I hope you do too. It's what lights up the darkness in my world, and I'm sure in yours, which is why when you're not watching Doctor Who, you're listening to some brat talking about it, and presumably a lot of you are walking your dogs right now, because that's when I do my podcast listening to, so if you are set up, if during this walk, when you're trying to enjoy me talking about episode 4 of Meglos, you are set upon by some miscreants, equally miscreanty hound, just remember to de-escalate the situation and come home and watch Meglos Part 4, and all your cares will go away. And I'm sure next time I speak to you, this will be slightly less fresh in my mind. But as I say, I know it will never quite go away. Isn't that mad? Oh dear, life. But anyway, we must not give it its. We must not give it any power, must we? Much like what's happened to the poor residents of Tigella. Anyway, look, off we go. Take good care of yourselves. It's a jungle out there.
I think you'll find.
I think you'll find.
I think you'll find. I think you'll find.
Well, so before you write in, let's get it out of the way. Tom Baker announced that he was leaving Doctor Who on the 3rd of November 1980, so it was after, indeed, the broadcast and production of Meglos. Now, had he decided before that and word got out and they'd stuck that into the... I don't know. Things seem to happen a lot closer to the wire in those days. And anyway, by the time Warriors Gate was on, because there was a gap in transmission because it was done over Christmas time and all of that, I did know that Tom Baker was leaving Doctor Who. So yes, I associate Warriors Gate with knowing that Tom Baker's on the way out, and not Meglos, because we didn't know then. So how that ties in with Brotodak's line about now that he's not playing the Doctor, that may have been as a result of stuff happening behind the scenes or whatever, but it certainly wasn't in my noggin, and certainly wouldn't have occurred to anybody watching at the time, because as far as anybody was concerned, Tom Baker was still playing Doctor Who. They didn't find out that he wasn't going to be for a few weeks after Meglos had finished. I knew my memory wasn't cheating me. However, I've gotten out to look at Brat Farrar, which I was convinced said at the beginning, starring Frederick Treves and either Hannah Gordon or Prunella Scales and Mark Greenstreet, and with Dominique Barnes as well, in Brat Farrar. And I've just had to look at it on a little bit of it on YouTube, where it seems to have all been edited together. I don't know, I haven't looked at the whole thing, but the opening titles don't have any cast mentioned at all, and the closing titles, Mark Greenstreet gets top billing as Brat Farrar, and the other character that he played, there is a Doctor Who connection, by the way, because Terence Dix was in the production, and it's Angela Brown is the actress. Frederick Treves is in it, but so is Francis Matthews, and he actually seems to be he's certainly higher on the closing credits than Frederick Treves. So did I imagine that? But I don't know why it would have stuck in my head as being an odd thing. I remember thinking odd that the two sort of older actors were credited above the young star in the opening titles. I could see, and I could see the cliffs that are in the opening titles that I've just watched on YouTube, which don't mention any actors at all. So I must have just been hallucinating credits. I mean, stranger things have been known to happen, but how weird that anomalous thing was lodged in my head and actually never existed. So there we go. I'm an unreliable witness, even to my own childhood. So who knows what is true? I'm sure what's happened is that it's actually how it was, but somebody timey-wimey has gone and erased that to make it more in keeping with credits today, where older actors aren't credited above younger actors because of some sort of perceived seniority. And I'm not sure the world's any better now that doesn't happen. But then again, perhaps it didn't, because Grange Hill always used to list the teachers before the pupils, and I kind of approved of that slightly, the adults before the young people. But that clearly never happened with Brat Farrar, and my mind has completely made it up, and I've kind of just gone back and realised that perhaps I'm living a lie. Is that the first sign that I'm some kind of sleeper agent and my entire history is a work of fiction? Oh my God. Okay, well, there we go. So I think you'll find I'm some sort of extraterrestrial assassin. Great. Thank you for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke, and my special guest, Frazer Gregory, who can be found on Twitter at Felix Frazer. I'm grateful to him and, of course, to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Ruben Herfindahl, Stephen Moffat, Rich Wiggins, Michael Williams, Rhys Williams, Andrew Willis, Andrew Wilson, Sydney Wilson, Stephen White, Tom White, Lee Wood, Colin Kilpatrick, Mark Ledston, Ian Clark, Alex Noonan, Gavin Skinner, Runar Brutig Olsen, Roland Moore, Ed Jefferson, James Curray Smith, Keith Say, Steve Herr, Robbie C., David Bickley, Tom White, Sean Ditchfield, Andy Kitching, Drim Trenowden, and Legion Henderson. I think there were 2 Tom Whites then, or was one of them an imposter? The music is by Dave Gates, artwork by Dylan Patterson. To support these podcasts, please go to patreon.com/Toby Hadoke, where you get bonus releases, advance releases, monthly AMAs, and exclusive content for as little as £3 a month. You can also go to kofi.com/Toby Hadoke, which has no monthly commitment and just a one-off donation, or, and I know times are tight financially, you can spend no money at all by giving these 5 stars, liking, subscribing, and doing all the cyberspace-friendly stuff that helps podcasts to flourish. Now, one of the lovely things about not being organised enough to do these all in one go means that I can get input from other people in between episodes. So one of the lovely things about Patronville is that people can comment underneath the releases. And episode 3 of Meglos was released before I committed this verbal outpouring to tape. I'm sure it's not tape, whatever it is that's inside my computer. Don't write in, I don't care. Anyway, so Frazer Gregory is one of those people, and he comments underneath Meglos 3, where I think I've mused as to whether Frazer was alive or not during Meglos. He says he's happy to confirm I was indeed alive at the time of Meglos. However, I was only 10 months old, so my memory is a little sketchy. Okay. So you don't have the same sort of in your mind's eye memory that I have of that ending to episode 3. Also in episode 3, I mused as to the likeliness or not of Carl Sagan's dodecahedron model being the one that ends up in Doctor Who. Now, Lisa and Andrew are, indeed Andrew of Lisa and Andrew Troby of Lisa and Andrew, who is also Troby. Doesn't matter. One of them's called Andrew, one of them's got a spiky face and is... No, it's not, I think I've probably done enough jokes about 2 people being the same but having a spiky face. Writes in and says, because they've been brilliant correspondents to this particular instalment, dropping in lots of Meglos / Carl Sagan interface bombs. Troby says, although it's unlikely that Carl Sagan's dinky dodecahedron makes an appearance here, which I think I mused in episode 3, the children of 1980 wouldn't have far to look for one, as this is the period when Dungeons and Dragons starts to become more popular in the UK, and you'd use one as the 12-sided die, part of a set of mini Pythagorean solids you'd get when purchasing the game. I remember I had it, I did it. I mean, I didn't do it much, but I remember filling the die numbers with chalk so they're easier to read. That was one of the sort of things you had to do. And I remember lots of planning, and I think I remember lots of drawing of maps, but actually less game playing. I didn't have a big enough friends network. And I think I also have an image of some dungeon master throwing his weight about. I think it was a position, with power that you could abuse if you so wanted to. It's like anything, isn't it? Give somebody a bit of power and they ruin it. But I might have just made that up. But anyway, I very rarely played, but I did lots of the planning and character making and pre-fun admin, which maybe is I'm more drawn to the admin than the fun. Anyway, and Cosmos, says Troby, also uses scene sync in a couple of scenes when Carl is supposedly exploring the Great Library of Alexandria. So that's another Meglossy thing. Well, thank you to Lisa and Andrew, who do Round the Archive, which is a podcast I'd urge you to listen to. They are fascinating people who are also a force for good. People who, when I think of them, make me smile. And that's what it's all about, as is everyone with whom I correspond over in Patronville. Now, that's not to lure you there with the promise of anything other than the odd benign interaction, but I'd like to say for the record that I'm very happy over there, and I'm glad it exists, and I'm grateful to all the people. But I'm grateful to everyone who listens, full stop, not just the people who are patrons, because well, otherwise this is a very pointless exercise. I hope it hasn't been, and I think it's always an exercise that benefits from the input of others. So I'm glad that Lisa and Toby and Frazer and others have had a chance to drop in some thoughts in between episodes that I've then been able to pop at the end, because then it means also that this post-credits bit and this post-credits bit is perhaps less rambling and pointless than it usually is. And I shall stop now so that it doesn't become rambling and pointless like it usually is. It's interesting to note, though, isn't it, that the dodecahedron has more sides than the arguments on the planet Tigella. They're very two-sided. Science, religion. The actual shape that they're arguing over is more multifaceted than the morality on which their planet is built.